Good afternoon. My name is Kelly Riggs. I'm retired from the Greenville Police Department. And just to give you a quick background on myself, I spent 4 years in the United States Air Force, weapons system security police officer. When I got out, I was hired at the Greenville Police Department on August 8th of 1985. I worked road for 2.5 years, then I did special operations for a year and a half. I've spent 11 years in narcotics, working with the United States Drug Enforcement Administration and Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force for 4 years. I worked that until July of 2000. I got promoted to sergeant. I went back on the road as a road sergeant for 3 years, spent 4 years as supervising the Central Business District, the officers in the downtown area. And then I was moved in 2007 to back to investigations as a sergeant. I had the privilege of bringing your speaker today into investigations. He was actually watched him in 2006 working on the road as a road officer. He has a tenacity for what he does, and I've always appreciated his ability to do his job. He does it thoroughly. Michael Dean actually came. He actually came into investigation around 2011. I retired in 2012. I'd spent 27 years with the police department. In 2015, I went back and started working the front desk part-time, and I did that for 5 years until March of 2000. I got to watch Detective Dean, and yeah, I'm going to put him on a platform because he's extremely good at what he does. He's very thorough at what he does, and I was really privileged to be a part of bringing him up into investigations. He started out in the economic, basically burglary, those kind of crimes like that. He is sold in what he does, and working in the white-collar crimes. But he also has two gentlemen in the back here. One is Detective DiGirolamo. Most people call him DJ because they have a hard time pronouncing his name. And he came from Williamston, and then actually Detective Paramore, who actually used to work on the Bob Jones Police Department. They are a great, I consider these actually the three best investigators in the state of South Carolina, if not the Southeast. Okay? So I'm going to turn this over to Mike. I don't want to take any of his thunder, but thank you, Mike, for coming. And Pastor Miller did ask me to do this, but I wanted someone better than me up here.
Can everybody hear me? Maybe? Yes? No? So today we're going to pretty much talk about scams and the elderly. I know folks get offended when you call them old, but facts are facts. You know, nobody in this room is 20 anymore, I don't think. Maybe. I think there's a couple. But just to kind of put things in perspective, who thinks $1 million is a lot of money? Raise your hand if you think $1 million is a lot of money. I know. It doesn't matter. Last year, you had over $770 million was taken from just the elderly population in 2021. And that was only from about 98,000 people. So that kind of puts into perspective what we're going to be talking about today. So our main objectives, we're going to recognize and reduce the risk of financial exploitation, guard against identity theft. Everybody has a book. Well, I know we didn't have enough of the white and blue books, but everybody does have the identity theft book. If you did not grab one, we have plenty of those. We'll get to that book towards the end, but right now we're going to focus on the white and blue book. Just to kind of preface it, not everything that is on these slides, it doesn't go in order page for page. So if you would like to just follow along on the slides and then make notes as we go along, that would probably be the best thing. Then we'll talk about planning for unexpected loss and the ability to manage your finances, prepare for financial disasters. Now, we as the police department, we're not financial advisors by any stretch of the imagination. But this is just kind of a go-by, maybe a guideline to go with when it comes to that. So who can guess as to who is at risk for financial exploitation? If you take out the elder, take out who would be at risk that you guys think would be at risk for financial exploitation? Anybody. Doesn't have to be a certain race, color, gender, age group. It doesn't matter. The FDIC considers financial exploitation fraudulent or otherwise illegal, unauthorized, improper act or process of an individual that uses resources of an older person for personal benefit, gain, or profit. So that would be pretty much obtaining anything that's not yours from an elderly person. Doesn't have to just be money. It can be assets, property, anything that doesn't belong to them is essentially what it is. That goes back to any elder financial exploitation crosses all social, educational, economic boundaries. The folks that are actually most at risk would be those that have a regular income and have accumulated a lot of assets. Not necessarily tens of millions of dollars. It could just be tens of thousands of dollars. Anybody that's trusting and polite. I know some folks tend to think that they might be over trusting or over polite, but I mean, those are the ones that scammers target. Some people seem to be guarded when you talk to them. There could be a reason they could have been scammed before, but that's what scammers target. Anybody that's lonely or socially isolated, anybody that is vulnerable to a grief or loss, anybody reluctant to report exploitation. That could be somebody that's shy or afraid to speak up. I know in today's world there's a lot of people that are afraid to speak up because they're afraid of repercussions. And anybody that tries to be dependent from any other family members. So these are all the biggest examples of financial crimes or exploitation to the FDIC. So you've got your exploitation by an agent or POA or a person in another fiduciary relationship. That would fall under investments, somebody trying to get you to invest. Investment fraud and scams, theft of money and property by family members, lottery and sweepstakes scams, grandparent imposter scams, tax and debt collection scams, romance and charity scams, and then telemarketer mail. Those are probably some of the bigger ones that we deal with. And then you've got your contractor fraud, home improvement. The folks that do these, contrary to what some people think and feel, ends up being family members, caregivers, friends and neighbors, acquaintances, agents under power of attorney or actual attorneys, financial advisors, telephone scammers, internet scammers, home repair contractors, Medicare operators, romance scammers, and there's a few others that we'll end up talking about as well. So if you look at the why don't older adults report exploitation, I put those two in blue because the cases that I've dealt with, my partners now and my former partners as well, those are probably two of the biggest reasons why folks don't report elder exploitation. For shame and embarrassment, and then denial. That one is probably the most common. Folks don't want to admit that I was a victim. It happens in other crimes as well, not just exploitation. But you also got loyalty to family members and caregivers, fear of retaliation. Some folks might be dependent on the abuser, self-blame, and then lack of awareness. These are the folks that can actually help, of course, 911. In our state, it would be Adult Protective Services, and also DSS actually gets involved with some of those cases. We actually get, 4 or 5 of those a week, DSS referrals that we end up getting from different agencies or DSS. These are other examples of folks that can help. Banks or credit unions. Some folks think that when we get involved in an exploitation case, that as soon as the police get involved, we can get money back for victims. Unfortunately, in our state, that's not the case. We cannot freeze funds. We cannot seize funds unless it is for certain crimes. Unfortunately, elder exploitation is not one of those. And we can't just go knock on the bank's door over at SunTrust down the road and say, hey, Miss Wilson had all her money taken from her. We need you to put that money back in her account. Unfortunately, we can't do that. As much as we would like to do that, we can't do that. But we can definitely help in processes. If we don't know anybody personally, there's several folks in different avenues that we can go to help get that process started. And then there's also the consumer finance. They actually have a website that you can go to. All of these are actually, if you look on the back of your booklets, they're all on the FTC website as well. So it's, if you end up losing track or can't remember this, FTC website has just about every single website or connection you could think of. So exploitation by a fiduciary, we don't get many of these cases, but when they happen, it's usually a lot of money involved because it's somebody that's accumulated wealth over the years, whether it's good investments, property investments, and then somebody that's managing their property or their money tries to use that for their benefit. And it also falls back into one of the slides earlier where it talked about trusts. A lot of people think that they're in a position of power somewhat. They're over my money, so I trust them. They've been good for years, but get statements. Don't just leave it upon, you got X amount of dollars, I did this with your money. Put it on paper. I went too fast on that one. The fiduciary duties, they should only act in your interest, not theirs. That is the biggest thing when it comes to exploitation from fiduciaries. That is separate from their commissions. Their commissions is like their pay. But you got some that end up treating your money like their money. POA, power of attorney, another acronym, of course. But a power of attorney is a legal document that allows someone else to handle your finances on your behalf. That's pretty much just a fail-safe, but there have been times, cases that we've dealt with, that the power of attorney ended up using the money for their own benefit. In our state and just about every other state that I've dealt with, the power of attorney, if that person is alive, who the power of attorney is for, any money that power of attorney uses has to be for the benefit of the person that the money belongs to. One of the things that some folks get tied up with power of attorney, let's just say Bob is the elderly person that has all the money, and his kids are power of attorney. And let's just say Tommy takes care of Bob's money, he's his power of attorney. He can actually move Bob's money from Bank of America, let's say Bob's with Bank of America. Tommy wants to move it over to BB&T because he banks with BB&T. That is 100% legal as long as he keeps those separate. Once he puts them into the same account, he's violated that, which would be considered an exploitation if he starts using that money for his own benefit. So these are the main risks for power of attorney: pressure to grant more authority than you wish, misusing funds, and unauthorized actions. Most of those tend to be, if you use Bob and Tommy, for example, Tommy's got 3 kids, so they would be Bob's grandkids. Well, little Timmy went over to cut Bob's grass, and instead of getting $40 or $50 to cut its grass, he writes him a check for $1,000. That would be an example of somebody making an unauthorized gift. Something that would be very extraordinary. I know guys that cut grass for a living. I don't think they've ever been paid $1,000 for one grass cut. Pretty nice job if it was. Let's see. So the safeguards for power of attorney: avoid appointing anyone who mismanages money or has personal issues. That would be anybody that is bad with money, anybody that has a gambling problem. Now, would buying a lottery ticket once or twice a week be considered a gambling problem? Probably not. But if you've got somebody that just constantly, makes or breaks their life on, I'm going to hit the big one, I'm going to hit the big one, I'm going to hit the big one. Probably shouldn't trust that person. Tell trusted professionals about your power of attorney, including financial institution. If you need to change, cancel, or revoke the POA, avoid appointing hired caregivers. We've seen a few of these in the past where somebody needed long-term care. They got to befriend whoever it was that was caregiving, and they let them be power of attorney. They were a nice person, you know, I'm going to let him be my power of attorney. I know the guy, I know the girl, but in the long run, they're looking out for them, not for you. And then, of course, plan ahead. I know it's some things that folks don't like talking about, but when you get older, sometimes faculties go away. It's always better to do it way ahead of time than it is to do it last minute. We'll skip over that one. So the biggest thing, if you're a victim, report financial exploitation immediately to Adult Protective Services or local law enforcement. This is a pretty good slide to remember because it's not just for you, but if you see any kind of exploitation for somebody you know, I would say 90% of our exploitation cases come from referrals of friends, not just DSS. Some of the ones that myself and an older partner worked, two of our biggest money cases came from just a friend that was sitting at the house drinking tea and noticed that her Bank of America statement was a whole lot lower than what it used to be. So, you know, once we start making those calls, it all just falls in line. I mean, it's not a quick process, unfortunately, with getting bank records and all, but that's just kind of how it is. But that's how they start. It's just somebody noticing something, and it's usually a friend or family member that ends up telling us. Family members are usually the ones that end up, them or caregivers are the ones that end up abusing. Some of the things to safeguards, if you do have a caregiver, even somebody that might just come over to clean your house, try not to keep any kind of financial documents out. Anybody that keeps a wallet out, try and keep it in a place, change it up. Don't always put it in the same place. I know I come home every day, I put my keys in the same spot, but I don't ever put my wallet in the same place. Ever. Same thing with checkbooks. Don't leave those out in the open. If you do, just try and keep track of the numbers, because those end up getting taken as well. And a lot of folks don't know it until, you know, a month or two down the road when they're balancing checkbooks. I know I don't balance one, but I know my aunt does. She still balances hers. I think it's every third week of the month she does. She'll sit down and balance it out, every single one. Let's see. If you don't have automatic bill pay, instead of writing checks, I know this is the age of technology, some people don't like it, but it does help. I'm one of those that didn't really like it, but and then you can also set up transaction alerts. Those are very good. I have an American Express account. American Express, they have an app. Once you download the app, you can have it set up where it notifies you of every single transaction. So I get notified of any transaction done outside of the state of South Carolina on my account. And it's usually pretty instantaneous. The last time I was in Vegas, I gave the lady my card. She swiped it. I got the notification before she gave me the card back. So, I mean, it told me, which, I mean, I was there using it, but the age of technology is good. Other safeguards, don't let hired caregivers open mail, pay bills, manage your finances. The biggest one at the bottom there, don't give them your PIN. Don't give them your PIN. If worse comes to worse and they have to run it as credit, I think most places now, if you run a debit card as credit, you just have to put in the zip code. If they know your address, the odds are pretty good they know your zip code. But don't give them your PIN. If it's a family member, the FDIC will tell you not to give them your PIN, but I mean, if you trust your kids or other family, let's see. Securing valuables. On this slide, that was probably the most. I get on to my aunt and my mother about it a lot. They have somebody that comes and cleans their house, but my aunt is bad about taking jewelry off and just sitting it on the counter, sitting it on the table. And I tell her all the time, I bought you a safe for Christmas. Use it. Don't let the dust collect in it. You know, put some jewelry in it. Let the jewelry collect the dust. So some of our scams, romance scam. Has anybody, or I guess I shouldn't say who has anybody been in contact with somebody that has been involved in a romance scam? Well, what would you guys think a romance scam would consist of without reading the slide? It's already up, but.
Meeting somebody online?
Yes. A lot of these guys and girls, it's not just to one sex or religion or nationality. A lot of times people use Facebook as a way to grieve, you know, which is good in a way, but scammers use that as well. And they look for folks that are on hard times, single, and they befriend somebody. It's usually using an identity that is not who they are. The most recent one that I had was, a lady was talking to a doctor who was doing missionary work down in Africa. Befriended her, talked to her probably 2 or 3 months, and then told her that his daughter was with him, she had hospital bills, and they needed to get back home, and needed her to send money ASAP. She ended up getting scammed of about $480,000. But the guy had a fake identity. He was not who he said he was. If you're a doctor overseas doing work, you've probably got money to get back home. And it doesn't happen overnight. Like I said, that case, it was 3 months or so before she started talking to him via text. So it started with Facebook messages, then it went to text. A lot of these folks that are doing the scams, if you try and call them at the number that they've texted from, or even an email address that they've provided a number, if you call, they'll get defensive. That's usually the biggest red flag. If you're in any kind of romance or any kind of relationship with anybody, they should not get mad if you call. 90 times out of 100, that's not going to be the case. They're not going to be mad if you call. But a lot of these romance scams, that's where it ends up going. They'll get mad, get belligerent with you, claim that they need money for an emergency, ask for paying unexpected customs fees or gambling debts, requested travel expenses. That little fourth bullet there, seeking smaller amounts, and then later ask for bigger amounts. That case I told you about, he started asking for phone cards, 10 to 20 minute phone cards being sent, and then it got to being gift cards, and then it was finally just one big lump sum. They'll contact you through the social media, talked about that. A lot of the photos that these guys and girls use, it's all copied from other people's, you know, so if it was an example of somebody in this room, we're all in South Carolina, they might use somebody from Arizona, because the odds of you knowing who that person's picture is, very, very slim. They'll use excuses to meet in person once they start getting money. That kind of falls under the starting out with smaller amounts before they get to bigger amounts. About like any relationship. You talk on the phone a little bit, then you want to meet in person, go on dates, yada yada. But the biggest thing with romance scams is if somebody's leery about meeting in person, after you've been talking for 4 or 5 months on the phone, but then they get mad when you call them or ask them to meet in person, that's another big red flag. Dun, dun, dun. In some of these cases, you'll find somebody that's overly complimentary or flirtatious, shower you with attention. It kind of falls back on when they shower you with attention. If you try and, reverberate that or reciprocate it, they get defensive. Well, if it was a true relationship, that wouldn't be the problem. If somebody does get help or needs help, stop communicating with the scammer. You don't have to necessarily delete your Facebook, but some of these cases in the past, we've had to tell the victim, just block that person. If they end up still contacting you, just delete your Facebook. Leave it dormant for a few months and then bring it back on. You can also contact any of the social media sites to actually use that information. You can let them know and alert them that, hey, this person's probably a scammer, and they'll look into it a little bit more. Because honestly, Facebook is worldwide, so I couldn't tell you how many users there are, but there's no way that they could check every single user that's on Facebook. If you do send money, in the unfortunate event that you do send money, notify your bank right away. If you wanted to, or if you were in fear, like if you know somebody, I think there was a couple of folks that raised their hand that knew somebody that was a victim of a romance scam. Your bank has what they call banker's notes. You can have them add, hey, if I do a transaction over $5,000, ask me why. You can have your bank tell you that anytime you come to get money. You just go in, tell your banker, hey, I would like to add this to my account. If for some other reason down the road, if there's a reason why I'm asking for $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, ask me why. The victim that I told you about that sent $480,000, she had a account with her bank since the 70s. Came in and asked to transfer her money from account A to account B. They didn't bat an eye. Now, we could place blame all day long, but essentially it falls back on the account holder. So if you put that caveat in place ahead of time, you're already way ahead of the ballgame. Investment fraud, misleading senior certifications, designations, Ponzi schemes. Ever since Madoff, you don't really see many of those. There's still a few nowadays. You'll have folks that pose as financial advisors, have affinity fraud, internet fraud, and then inappropriate fraudulent annuities. I think our most recent one had a victim. He was looking to get into $1 million worth of Morgan Silver dollars. I'm not picking on age groups, but I think everybody in this room knows why Morgan Silver dollars are expensive. They're still hard to come by, but the melt value of a silver dollar is probably worth $15 to $20. We had a victim that was going to buy $1 million worth of Morgan Silver dollars at face value. If there's ever something that somebody tries to get you to invest in and it seems too good to be true, it is. Don't ever forget that. If there's anything that you take from this room, don't forget that. He was going to buy $1 million worth of silver dollars, turn around and flip it for 15 to 30, and he lost $1.1 million. That's pretty much what that one boiled down to. But anybody that tries to say they're a broker, they work in investments, if you go to brokercheck.finra.org, that anybody that is a licensed broker has to register on that site. They have to. If they put that they are an actual licensed broker, that has to be on that website. You also have the NASAA and the CFBP. Of course, that goes without saying, don't trust strangers. I think everybody's taught that when they're little kids, don't trust strangers. Take time to understand investment strategies. A lot of guys that end up posing as investment bankers or folks that are just trying to get you to invest money, if they are on you nonstop and can't give you time to stand and think, there's something wrong with it. That kind of falls under it's too good to be true. Ask for written explanation of every investment opportunity. Anybody that's afraid to put something down on writing, putting it down in plain black and white, or if they like to use blue ink, blue and white, there's no reason any investment person or broker should not be afraid to put that down. That very first bullet, if you had a highlighter, highlight it. Don't Don't ever make checks payable. If you're using ABC Investments and Tom Wilson is your broker, you should never write a check to Tom Wilson, period. It should always go to ABC Investments. It shouldn't go to anybody else, even if it's somebody that you've known for 50 years. If they're working for an investment firm or a brokerage firm, that check should always be made out to the actual firm or brokerage. Of course, nowadays, most of the time they use actual wire transfers. But if you do that, in the event that they do wire transfer, make sure it's an account that goes just to the bank, or to the broker, not to the actual person. And your bank can verify that, especially when you start talking about tens of thousands of dollars. That money should go directly to the bank, to the brokerage firm. The timing is critical. That goes back to somebody that's just hounding you nonstop, wanting you to hurry up and make a decision. So these are the pointers. These go back to, we're not financial advisors. We don't advise financially. What they recommend is that you save enough to cover 6 months if you're going to do an investment. Make sure before you do an investment that you have money that'll cover you to live for 6 months. Don't put all your eggs into one basket. If there's ever questions that you have, it's kind of like being in math class. If you had a question you didn't understand, don't be, what was the saying? There's no such thing as a dumb question. Only the ones that aren't answered are the dumb questions, or ones that aren't asked. Yeah, not asked. Marketing tactics like a free lunch. Everybody likes free stuff. Free lunches, you don't get extra investments for free lunches. Understand the risk before you invest. Make sure your financial advisor does know if you have one, and make sure that they explain what all the risks are. So, does everybody understand what FDIC is? FDIC insurance. Is there anybody that doesn't know? Don't be shy. Anybody? Everybody knows? Okay. There are some people nowadays that use Cash App as a form of banking. I'm sure everybody's heard of it or seen it on TV possibly. Cash App is another form of banking, or Chime bank accounts kind of fall under the same guidelines. Those are not FDIC insured. So those are actually not insured if that bank was to go into bankruptcy. Your money is not insured if it was in one of those accounts. So if you ever do any kind of banking, do any kind of investments, make sure that it's FDIC insured. So this shows the different accounts that the FDIC actually does insure: your single accounts, joint accounts, trust accounts, and retirement accounts. And if you don't understand the whole FDIC.gov, all the deposits that are made, are covered, or are not covered, if you go to the FDIC website, they have a pretty good little breakdown box of how all that stuff is. And then, of course, your bank will also know which accounts would be and would not be covered under FDIC. Let's see. Telephone scams and internet scams. The scams that these guys use are getting better and better. My partner, Deej Rolamo, and I, we probably get no less than 7 or 8 a week. I've had them on desk phones, I've had them on my work cell, my personal cell, doesn't matter. We like to toy with them, make fun of them, get them angry. You're going to waste my time, I'm going to waste yours. But when it comes to scams, be mindful of what you do and don't give when you talk to somebody on the phone. The next few slides are going to show the different scams that we've actually dealt with and the most common ones. This grandparent scam usually involves a kid or grandparent or grandchild, that has been arrested, is in some kind of trouble, might be in another country, needs a plane ticket home. If you have grandkids, remember your grandkids' names. That's half the battle. I think one of the most unfortunate ones that I had was a victim. His grandson was in jail out in California, needed $4,000 to pay his bail. He went down to Walgreens, got $4,000 worth of gift cards, sent it to bad guy. Got a call back about 3 hours later. Hey, we need $4,000 more to pay for an attorney. He went back down, got more cards, sent him the money. His son comes home about the same time he's getting back from a third time to Walgreens. Says, what are you doing? He's like, well, little Bobby was arrested out in California. Dad, Bobby's been dead for like 3 years. So, you know, the guy had Alzheimer's, a little bit onset, early dementia, but they were taking advantage of that because they knew that his grandson was dead. They knew that the guy had dementia. So they were just taking advantage, and that's $12,000 that he'll never see again, ever. Don't wire money. There's no reason you should wire money to anybody, especially if your grandkid. I know everybody wants to be there for their grandkids, but sometimes they got to bite the bullet. If you got to do double checking, do double checking. When it does come to those, in the event your grandchild gets arrested and you get attempted to get scammed out of money, there's no police department on the face of the planet that takes money over the phone. That's number one. Number two, it's probably going to a judge. So like if you were arrested in Greenville, you're not going to give any money to the police department that is paid for bail. None of that money goes to the police department or sheriff's office. That all goes to the judges. And the judge's office, they actually have to report every little penny that comes through that little glass window. But they don't accept any money over the phone. Next, we got the IRS. Anybody been scammed or attempted to have been scammed by the IRS on the phone? The IRS does not take money over the phone, contrary to some people's belief. You won't get anything from the IRS via email telling you to send money. They won't send you anything via email to reset your password. They do ask for a PIN number when you call in, but that's a PIN number that you set up on an account before. If you have never used the IRS before and they say to put in your PIN, if you've never called into their automated service, you might want to check somebody's used your account at some time or another. Everybody in this room have or does anybody not have caller ID? How about that? Or does anybody know what web-based phone applications are? So you can download, if you've got a smartphone, there's apps that you can download, and you can put on the app whatever phone number you want it to be. So was that Marlene? So I could download an app, and I could put that I'm calling you from Marlene's phone number. But I'm definitely not Marlene. And it only takes a few seconds for somebody to do that. They do the same thing with the IRS. They spoof it. I want to say 95% of our scams that we get for IRS-related scams, they're all phone numbers that they try and make them look like they're from Washington, D.C. Well, you know, if the IRS is calling, it's not going to be from a D.C. number. It would probably be from a toll-free number. Some of the IRS scams, they say that if you don't give up money, we're going to take you to jail. IRS doesn't do that. If they're going to take you to jail, they show up at your house. They'll have vests on probably, and they'll say, hey, we're going to take a ride. You got a free address change. Let's see. So if by some chance you ever get any kind of correspondence with the IRS, it comes through the United States Postal Service. It doesn't come FedEx, doesn't come UPS, and it doesn't come in your inbox through Google or Yahoo Mail. It always comes through the U.S. mail. Let's see. If you think that you do owe taxes, you're more than welcome to call that number. And if you do get a scam, or if you get a phone number that you get nonstop calls from, and every time you pick up, it is somebody saying, hey, I'm Bob Jones or I'm Tim Jones with the IRS. You owe us a balance of whatever. you can actually go to this website, the ftccomplaintassistant.gov. It falls under that FTC website. And you can fill out, it's like a five or 10 question questionnaire. You fill it out and then they look into it. So next we got lottery and sweepstakes scams. We don't get many of these anymore. They used to be really prevalent, where they say, hey, I'm, a prince from somewhere in Africa and I've come into $30 million. You're the one that drew the lucky number. If you know for a fact that you did not register for any kind of sweepstakes or lottery, it falls back to that saying we said a few minutes ago. It's too good to be true, it is. Even if you do win the lottery by some chance, I'll give you my address if you need it, but you never pay any money up front. The only money that you would pay up front on a lottery is if you won the lottery and you wanted to pay your taxes before you get the money. That's it. You don't pay 30 grand to get your 30 million. You don't pay 10 grand to get your 5 million. You always pay your taxes when you get the money. And there's no attorneys that come with your winnings. The very last bullet there, we've had a couple victims that fell for that. They had attorney such and such calling to say, hey, I'm going to take care of your fees. You just pay me up front $7 grand, and we'll make sure you get your $2 million. Of course, they never got their $2 million, unfortunately. Let's see, we talked about the pay to play. If you do win the lottery, the second to last bullet there, that goes back to somebody that's trying to hustle you, going fast, 90 miles an hour down a 2 mile an hour road, trying to get you to buy into what they're talking about. If you ever win the lottery, you got 180 days. So if you can't make up your mind if you want to collect it in 180 days, you got plenty of time. But, some of these guys that are doing these scams, they're going to tell you, you've got to do it within a week. You've got to do it within a day. So this is activity 1. We'll kind of use this as a break, get folks a chance to get some water, get some chips. You can do the activity that's in your book. Your book is going to be on page 31 if you wanted to look over that and do it. And there's also another one on page 36. Those are little activities that you can do on your own. You don't have to do it right now, but we'll take a 5-minute break, let folks stretch their legs and get something to drink. All right, so we'll get back on our scam adventures here. Folks that end up getting some of these phantom debt collection scams, it's usually from credit card companies that you don't have. A lot of folks ended up finding that they might be a victim of identity theft as well. Some of the most common ones that we deal with, somebody might find out that they have a Best Buy card that was opened up in their name, and a collection agency is trying to collect $1,200, $1,300 saying, hey, you owe this money from Synchrony Bank, which is usually the Best Buy card, or one of those companies. But they'll pose as law enforcement agents. We gave some of those examples earlier. If anybody is calling from a legit agency, they're not going to have a problem saying who they are, what website you might be able to find them at, what their name is, title, or an exact phone number. It's only happened a couple times, but I've had a few victims that I've called out of the blue that were victims of identity theft, and they were so worried and scared that they ended up hanging up on me, called the police department to confirm that our police department does have a detective dean, and then they called me back. Which, we can get mad all day long, but, in actuality, they're doing what we've kind of told them to do over the years. They refuse to give you a mailing address, phone number, like I said, but the biggest thing out of those last 2 bullets there, if they start asking for personal financial information, if by some chance you owe money to a debt, they're not going to take that money over the phone from that direct person. Most places that do collect debts, they transfer you to another department or just tell them to send you something in the mail. There's nothing wrong with that. If you ask for a debt collector to send you, if they say that you owe them money, if you say, hey, I need you to send me a detailed statement of what I owe and an address I can send that money to, they have to send it to you. So even if you were to actually legit owe money to Macy's, if you called them, they have to give you a detailed statement once you ask for it and where you send that money to. They have to. No ways around that one. If you do, like I said, they should know what their name is, give you an actual name, where you can send that money to. If it's something that you don't recognize, ask for it in writing. That goes back to the whole ask for a statement. Keep any kind of statements that they do send you, or if they send you something in the mail and you're like, you don't recognize what this $1,200 you owe is, keep that. And then when you get a copy of the statement that you requested in the mail, keep that with it as well. There's not very many times that folks end up having to get an attorney when it comes to something like that, but it does happen. Let's see, we're going to skip over that one. Signs of charity scams. Has anybody in this room ever been to the Secretary of State's website? If anybody gets a call from a charity, if any charity is registered in the state of South Carolina, or even any of them that are registered nationwide as well, if they're doing work here in the state of South Carolina, they have to be on that website. And if they are an actual charity, they will give you their tax ID number. That way you can write it off on your taxes as well. But some of these charity scams, be mindful of the website that they use. I know one that comes to mind right offhand would be the Peace Center. We get folks that get scammed out of tickets all the time from the Peace Center because they go to peacecenter.com, not peacecenter.org. Peacecenter.org is the Peace Center's actual website to buy tickets. So some of these scams, I know March of Dimes had one, it's been several years back, but somebody was using marchofdimes.org, not the .com. Let's see, if you end up getting a letter in the mail that says, thank you for your pledge, that's what we call a clue, Scooby. Any actual charity will not pressure you. Kind of goes back to the fast tactics of trying to be a fast talker, trying to get you to give money quickly before you got time to think. They're not going to pressure you into giving that money. And about 95% of charities are not going to feel comfortable with you wiring money. Don't wire money to a charity. Write them a check, give them cash in person. They take all of those. And even nowadays, you've got some places that'll do Square. If you actually do a Square payment, I don't know if everybody knows what a Square is, but easiest way to think of Square, it's a mobile device to actually take card payments. I actually did one for Special Olympics recently. It comes up Special Olympics on the transaction. So if you actually do run into somebody that says that they're taking money for March of Dimes, Special Olympics, whatever charity, if you swipe that card and it doesn't pop that up on your statement, go call somebody. Call us, call the county, wherever it is that it happens at. We can follow up on it to see if it actually is. It's not very often that it happens, but it does happen. Then they won't ask for any kind of routing numbers and bank numbers. That kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier. If you do give money to a charity, I know there's some where they like to, I think March of Dimes, that's a big one. If you go to Arby's or something and donate $1, they'll put your name on a little, one of those little pieces of paper and they hang it up on the window. A real charity is not going to ask you for your name, your address, your date of birth, your social, any of that stuff. So just be mindful of that when it comes to charity scams. Keep a record of your donation. That would be a big one that comes in handy at tax time. And then actually, if you give money to a charitable organization, they can show you where that money goes. maybe not necessarily exactly down to the penny, but they will actually tell you, yes, that money went in, it came into our account, we can give you that much information. That goes to the payments. Computer and internet scams. These are some big ones. You got phishing scams. The city of Greenville makes us go through quarterly computer training. And it's really just, we sent you a fake email, and if you opened it, you failed. And then your supervisor has to make sure you watch these video slides to not do it again. But sometimes it ends up being the supervisor that opened it, and then we get to make fun of them, so it works out. If you get an email from somebody that you do not know, don't open it. Just delete it. If it's that important and they know who you are, they'll call you. Or they'll send you something in the mail. A lot of the phishing emails that folks end up sending, what it is it's like a keylogger, where as soon as you click the email, it kind of lets them backdoor into your computer. And then every keystroke that you make, they get to see every keystroke you make. Sometimes they'll pose certain websites like bestbuy.com. They might pose that you're getting an email from Best Buy. If you ever do get an email from a big company or corporation, most of the time that email, as soon as you open it up, it's going to be almost like their webpage. So if you do get something from a company, I know my aunt shops at Macy's, she shops at Belk's, she gets all those emails all the time. But every now and then she'll get one that, it says stacy@macys.co.com. That's a clear sign that it's not coming from Macy's. So whenever you do, if you're looking on your computer, if you take your mouse and hover it over an actual email address, it will actually show you what that person's email address is before you click on it. So if you just hold your little mouse cursor, don't click on it, but if you hold it over that person's email address, it will show you the actual email address. So if it's, if you're expecting an email from bob@charter.com and you hold your cursor over that email address and it says, timbuck27@gmail.com, just go ahead and delete it. Don't click anything in that email, because as soon as you do, all that does is backdoors your computer and lets them in. That kind of falls into that bottom one, the email spoofing. Telltale language in some of these internet crimes, it suspects that you've done an unauthorized transaction. Well, if you know that you haven't used your card in several months, you know that wasn't you, delete it. Don't even click it. Or during our regular verification accounts, you couldn't verify your information, or our records indicate your account was overcharged. So if you do have an internet hardwired into your computer and you use your computer regularly, make sure your updates, I know a lot of folks, if you have Apple, those automatically update pretty much every time you shut down and turn your computer on, unless they're major updates. Windows does the same thing. When it does come to those computers, Windows doesn't call you saying, hey, we've detected a bug on your computer. We need you to give us your password information so we can help debug your computer. If you can only imagine how many smartphones are in this room alone, even if you broke it down into Apple devices and Android devices, somebody at Windows would have their hands full just from the people in this room. So if you could imagine Windows worldwide, there's no way that they have the ability to check every single computer that's hooked up through Windows. It's just not possible. So if you get those, hit delete. The biggest thing on that slide right there, if you look at the passwords, please don't use the same passwords over and over. I always tell people I have a black book that I keep my passwords in. My girlfriend thinks it's another kind of black book, but it's not. It literally has just my passwords. So try not to use the same exact passwords over and over. If you do, keep track of it, but don't keep them on your computer. We had a lady that had her house broken into in the county several years back. They stole her computer, which did not have any kind of password to get in it. And then on her desktop, she had a folder that was labeled, if anybody can guess it, passwords. They had every single password for every single one of her accounts. Her regular banking account, her teaching savings account, all her 401k stuff, everything. But try not to keep them all the same. Because in the event that you do have somebody that does get a keylogger on your computer, they've only got one to remember. It's not that hard. Don't give control to your computer if by some chance you do get a call for somebody saying they are Windows. Windows is not going to ask for your device number. They're not going to ask for your serial number. They're not going to ask for your IMEI number. Your IMEI number is something that is specific to your computer, even your smartphone. If you do end up running into something involving a scammer on your computer, if you go to onlineguard.gov, that is actually run by the United States government. It's not just some random website. They actually have folks that can help you to get your computer set back up the way it was before if somebody does get control of your computer. Or you can find a computer shop that's local. They'll do it as well. This kind of goes back to the phishing attacks. If it's a message that you don't realize, don't recognize, if you get an email from Macy's, you don't have a Macy's card, you've never used your email at Macy's, just delete it. So when it comes to keeping your computer up to date, if there's a website that you go to, and if you ever look at the top of a website when you're searching, it'll have HTTP. If it says HTTPS, you're on a secure site. It's got to have the S for you to know if it's secure. If you click on something on your computer that tells you that you need to update or download something, and it does not have that, you're usually going to be on a scammed website or on something that's going to be used for phishing. It's not going to be a secure site. If you downloaded anything from Apple, you download anything from Windows, it'll open up another window and it'll have that HTTPS. So the biggest thing, identity theft. The state of South Carolina has come a long way from what identity theft used to be. It used to be for somebody to be charged with identity theft, they had to use your name, date of birth, and social. Now it's using your name, using your driver's license number, social, date of birth, any of those. Doesn't have to be all of those. But any of these things that are up here, you need to safeguard from everybody. Maybe not a spouse, but because what's yours is hers and hers is yours. Everybody knows that saying. How many people, maybe with just a nod of the head, you don't have to raise your hand as a flag, but who keeps their Social Security card in their wallet? I know I used to. My brother still does, and I yell at him all the time. Don't ever keep that on your person. Keep it in a safe at your house or in a strong box. A lot of folks end up getting their identity used or getting Social Security cards lost because it's in their wallet. We get reports all the time. Somebody had their car broken into, wallet taken, Social Security card was one of the things that's listed. If I got paid $1 for every report I've read that had that, I can only imagine. So, if anybody has anything, any thoughts about getting your identity stolen, get you a shredder on whether you should keep documents, what you should throw away, shouldn't throw away. Like anything that you get from a bank, shred it. Don't just throw it in the trash. We get a lot of cases, especially nowadays, you got guys that they steal trash just for one reason, just to get people's information out of the mail. There's so many different places that you can get it if you've got access to it. Some guys use the dark web. Some people do it the cheap way. It doesn't cost anything to pay for somebody's trash. It's already trash. But if you have a shredder, or if you don't have a shredder, you can get them cheap. You can get one at Walmart for $10, and it'll shred like 12, 15 pages at a time and just drop it through the shredder. Monitor any bank accounts and credit card bills. And then the biggest thing there is don't give anybody your personal information. And then that very bottom one, you can actually review your credit report. You don't have to raise your hand, but most people don't know it. You can get a credit report for free every single year. Doesn't cost you a dime. Your bank can run it for you if you don't want to set up a website through Experian, Equifax, or TransUnion. You can go to your bank and request one. You get one every year without paying for it. Depending on how much money you keep in your account, they probably give you one every month if you ask for it. Sometimes you'll have folks that will use your Social Security, might use your Social Security information to open up a website. We actually haven't had too many of these cases where somebody's had their information used on the Social Security website itself. But there are folks that have reached that age where they can file for Social Security. They go to sign up for the website and their information is already used. If you do, you can always go to ssa.gov. You can also call their customer service number and they can tell you if an account has opened or if you're having trouble with it. But anything on the Social Security website, that will actually help you out if you do have trouble with that information. This slide and the next slide, so these kind of coincide with the little green book if anybody didn't get it. That identity theft booklet, pretty much everything that's in that booklet is in the blue and white booklet. But in the back of the green one, there's actually templates if by some chance that your information was used or identity was stolen. There's templates in the back of that booklet that you can actually print up. You can actually get off their website, print it up. You can plug and play, so to say. So you don't have to retype everything. You just plug in your name and print it off. And then if anybody sends you something saying, hey, you owe us X amount of dollars for this account, you know you didn't start it, you can actually send that information off. Medical identity theft. That's when somebody uses your medical treatment, or your Medicare number, Social Security number to get medical treatment, prescription drug, or surgery. We don't run into these all that often. I think I've only made 3 cases of somebody getting their information used for a hospital bill that they didn't get. If you do end up getting any kind of medical theft, it's not an easy overnight thing. If you were to have any kind of information used, you would hope that it's with a credit card, not with the hospital, unfortunately. But your Medicare coverage, if you do have Medicare, monitor it like you would your bank statement, because Medicare only covers up to so much. So if somebody else is using yours, you're going to be kind of the last man out if all your money's already used up for that year. So if you end up getting any kind of medical bill, and sometimes they'll actually put a mailing address or an actual billed to address. I know with most single people, or not single people, but not businesses, most people actually, their mailing address is their billed address. If you get something and you notice that your billed address and your mailed address are totally separate, check with the hospital or even check with Medicare, because more than likely somebody's used your information at some point in time. Protect your Medicare and insurance cards. That's the biggest one on this slide here. Treat it kind of like your Social Security number. Don't let anybody use it that knows it. And if you don't already, keep track of what your files are. If you do have any kind of surgeries using your Medicare, make sure they give you detailed statements. Whether you're elderly or young, I always tell people, if you have any kind of surgery at a hospital, get a detailed statement. I know several people that have gotten a bill for some surgery that they got back in January, And then they had another procedure done in April. And what they were already billed for in January is now popped up on the April bill. So it wasn't necessarily that somebody was using their information, but they were getting billed 2 or 3 times for something that they had already paid for. And I know with the elderly, they tend to do that a lot. I know my aunt's had that done to her as well. Activity 3, that's going to be on page 60, not on 79, that's on the slide. If you guys wanted to do that later on at your own leisure, you're more than welcome to. Planning for the unexpected. This kind of falls back into what we were talking about earlier with investment type stuff. It's just advice. It's not any kind of money direction, so to say. But try and plan for your future. Set money aside that you don't, I wouldn't want to say that you don't keep track of, but it's something that you don't use. I know me, I've got an account for a bank that I don't have a debit card, I don't have checks, I don't have anything attached to it. I just got a few dollars that goes in at every check. I don't ever see that money. I know it's there because I still get statements, but I can't spend that money. So kind of treat it as an extra savings account. When you do prepare a plan, make sure you review what you're setting aside. Don't kind of plan to set back, $200 or $300 a month when you know you could probably only afford to do $100. That might be kind of getting ahead of the gun, so to say. If you do get power of attorney set up, make sure somebody knows about it. Somebody in your family, a close friend. And just make sure that there's a copy that somebody can get a hold of. That way, if something does come up, somebody was to steal your identity or pose that they are your power of attorney, you've got an original copy, and you know that who is your power of attorney is not the person that made that one up, if that makes sense. We've only had a few cases in the last, 10 or 12 years that I can think of where somebody was posing as a power of attorney for a victim. But luckily their distant son that they hadn't talked to in 5 or 6 years actually had their original power of attorney. So we were actually able to show that the person posing as the power of attorney pretty much made his own paperwork up, and we compared it to the one that was actually the power of attorney. So if you're receiving Social Security benefits, it should be in one of those 2 forms up there. It should be direct deposit or debit card. Most people, it's probably direct deposit nowadays. Preparing for financial disaster. This kind of goes back to the whole, I know your driver's license is probably, most everybody keeps that on them at all times. They tell you to do that in the DMV handbook. But any of your Social Security cards, your passport, birth certificate, and insurance cards, you should keep a copy of your insurance card on your person, not the actual card. A lot of people end up carrying that around with them with their Social Security card, but like I said, keep that in a safe if you have one, even if it's just a little small safe that you end up having to get. Other items that you might want to keep on hand just as a fail-safe is cash, ATM cards, and a checkbook. Phone numbers for any important people or financial advisors. If you do, by some chance, that very last one, if you have a safe deposit box, had a call about 2 years ago. A lady's father died. She wanted us to help get her dad's safe deposit box key remade. Banks don't do that, unfortunately. So if you do have a safe deposit box key and you want other people to be able to access that at some point in time, make sure somebody knows. Or even if it's just a post-it note in a box, hey, I've got a safe deposit key over here. That way somebody knows about it. Make backup copies of any important documents. The biggest thing that we could take away from today, if you do have a power of attorney, any kind of paperwork that might be like a DNR, which would be a do not resuscitate paperwork, keep copies of that. Or if you have a family member that has any of that stuff, make copies of it. If you have an attorney, the attorney will probably keep the original and then turn that in with probate court. Most power of attorneys should be turned in up there. Making copies for loved ones, whatever that. Do not make it says make a copy of credit and debit cards. I wouldn't make a copy of those. Where to keep it in a safe. So the additional resource, I believe in every single book, or both the books that you've got today, the FDIC website is on there. They actually do have, for those that might be preppers, or somebody that is afraid of a zombie apocalypse, they've got a pretty good list of what you might expect to pack. This activity here is in the book, but you do not have to share it with the group. I would recommend you not share it. That's more like a self-activity. It's a pretty good detailed record. It's a table. You just put in different numbers, and then it tells you where you think you should be financially, kind of lets you know how secure you are with your information. So another scam would be reverse mortgages. We've had 2 of these in the last year. Somebody got hounded. They didn't really need the money, but they ended up doing a reverse mortgage on their house to add windows that were supposedly $20,000 windows, but they probably cost about $6,000. But they did a reverse mortgage on their house. So you'll have folks that'll end up trying to call, telling you to do a reverse mortgage, or they would suggest doing a reverse mortgage. It's almost like a title loan, where you get charged an exorbitant amount of interest compared to what you're actually taking out. Most of the time, these are actually loans that are taken out to help family members on that first bullet there. If you do end up having somebody that is your power of attorney, and you start getting mortgage paperwork at your house, knowing that your house is paid for, or you do not have a mortgage anymore. Or I've seen cases where somebody was renting a house, but they got a reverse mortgage letter and paperwork sent to their house, but they were renting the house. So their power of attorney actually filled out paperwork to do a reverse mortgage using their POA, which is kind of unfortunate, but unfortunately that's today's world that we live in. So contractor and home improvement fraud, this happens here in Greenville, unfortunately. This also falls under the pretense of using high pressure tactics to get overpriced goods or home improvements. They'll promise to do work at below market prices. Kind of falls back to the if it's too good to be true, it is. They'll deliver substandard, unnecessary work, damaging work, pressures to pay through threats or intimidation. They'll also use government officials to demand a fee. They'll pose as government officials demanding a fee. A lot of those that end up happening around here, you get folks that say, I'm going to charge you $1,000 to remove something at your property. Once the work is done, they don't just get the $1,000. They say, oh, well, we actually underestimated. You owe us $2,500, not the $1,000. And they will demand it, and then pressure the person into giving them the actual $2,500 instead of the $1,000 that they originally asked for. And then a lot of folks with elderly, they think that they're not going to follow around and check up on the work. So we actually do have people around in the area that would come by. Let's just say for here, they were going to do the window work, redo window work, say it was going to cost $5,000. And they come in and they start doing just a little bit of work after they've gotten their money, and then you don't see them again. That's usually what most of the cases that we end up doing. If you do have somebody that does come do work, there's no reason that they should not give you a business card. Even if they do give you a workup and they say it's going to cost, let's just use a round number, if it's going to cost $5,000, don't pay all $5,000 up front. If it's somebody that's going to do legit work, you know, hey, I'm going to pay you half now, half later when it's completed. Or I'll pay for materials up front and then I'll pay you the actual rest of it later. Any legit worker, they're not going to have any problem with that. You can also, so in the state of South Carolina, the good thing about us, anybody that is a licensed profession or in a licensed profession, which would be any kind of contractor work, anybody that's doing plumbing, electrical, they have to be registered on the state website. You can actually go to the Secretary of State's website, and then it actually falls under the, what's it, Licensing and Labor Commission. They actually check all of that information. You have to register through the state to work as a licensed contractor. Another one of those right there at the bottom, I skipped over. Don't pay in cash. Anybody that's doing legit work, sometimes you got guys that say, yeah, I'll give you a 20% discount if you pay in cash. If you pay in cash, can't really stop you, but video it or something so that there's a record. Because I could go around and I could say, everybody owes me $5. Give me $5 from everybody in the room. And then if it comes back 10 days down the road, unless somebody videoed me taking $5 from everybody, nobody's really going to know. I mean, everybody can get together and say, yeah, we all did, and we're going to give statements. But in theory, there's no record of you guys giving me $5 in cash. But if everybody wrote me a $5 check, for me to get that $5 from you, I've got to take that check somewhere. I can't just, say, hey, I need $5 for this check from the Sphinx without being a record. There'll be a record of it somewhere. So don't ever use cash if you can prevent it. If there's a question about a contractor that you're thinking about hiring local, you can actually go to the Consumer FTC website. It's in the blue and white booklets. If you didn't get one, we can get you a copy of one eventually. But anybody that is registered through the FTC website as an actual contractor, and there's actually a good many of them, but they actually use the Secretary of State to actually put contractors on those websites. So they're all usually pretty legit. One of our last scams that we'll talk about, scams that target veterans benefits. They actually have had some recently where they're posing as veterans that are either looking for money, trying to, live a better life, so to say, having hard times, or surviving spouses. They'll try and get monies from different folks. Usually they target the elderly, and they're trying to get lump sum payments for future benefits. If you're a veteran and you're getting benefits, your benefits go up with everybody's. It's not just one of those things where, kind of like falling in line with a lottery. Mr. Wilson, you guys everybody with the last name W is going to get an extra 10 grand. All we need you to give us $100 right now. And everybody with a W is going to get this extra money. Doesn't happen that way, unfortunately. If by some chance you do become a victim of a veteran or VA scam, you can actually contact somebody at the VA's office, or of course you can contact the police department. But some of these VA pension scams, they actually pose as attorneys, because a lot of that work is actually done through attorneys at the VA's office. So when it comes to pensions, speaking of pensions, if you have a pension, try not to use it. You might have somebody that contacts you if you fall under the elderly age group, as Mark was saying as his joke earlier. They will try and get you and pressure you into using some of your money that you've earned over the years to try and get you to either loan against it or just let them have access to it. Don't do that. And then don't ever sign over control of your benefits. That kind of falls under what we talked about earlier with power of attorney. Even though you do have, or you have signed somebody or appointed somebody as your power of attorney, they don't get all of your decision-making abilities. You actually still have that. Dun, dun, dun. All right. So now it is time for, I guess, everybody's favorite question and answer time. I don't know which way we would start, but I guess we can start on, we'll start on this side of the room and go that way, if that works. Is anybody over here? I got you. Anybody got a question over on this side, far side? Anybody? Anybody in the middle? Mark? Okay, so he asked a question of what's the better place or better way to keep passwords for all your websites? For us, just on my computer, to start my computer, I put in 3 passwords just to start it. Like I said, I've got a black book and it stays in a desk. If you can keep it in a little black book or, just a notepad, but keep that locked up somewhere. They've also got different apps. If you have a smartphone, they've actually got apps that you can actually keep your passwords on. One of the guys that we work with, he's got a ton of passwords that he has to remember. He has a password keeper. I believe that's what the app is called. That way, he has to have the biometrics using his thumbprint to get in it. So even when his phone is open and he's already unlocked his phone, he still has to access his password book, the password keeper app. He has to use his thumbprint again to open that up. But there's nothing wrong with printing them off or writing them down as long as you keep them in a safe place, separate from your computer or your device that you're using those passwords on. So for those that couldn't hear, she was asking if she doesn't have a shredder, but just taking her name and address and account numbers off of documents and then throwing those documents away and then getting rid of it. If you don't have a shredder and that's all you got, that works. I mean, most of the time, even when I check through mine, I make sure none of my account information is on it, and then I actually put that through the shredder. Or if you have Coke, I don't know if you drink Coke or have a bottle with coffee, you can put it in the bottle, shake it up, and over time it'll, dissipate. But that's one way to do it. But if you don't have a shredder, contact your bank, or if you do have an investment firm that you use. If you don't have a shredder, most of those places will actually get you a shredder if you ask them. We've done a few talks for different financial firms over the years. I know we did one a few years back at the Poinsett Club, and almost every person that came through that door got a shredder. Now, it might not have been a big one, but it's just a little small shredder that fits on top of a trash can. So, I mean, you can literally, I was at Walmart last night. They've got them for $10. You can get you a cheap one, and it works. So in theory, they can. So she asked if somebody can pose as using your phone number. Can they do the same thing with text? She asked that question earlier, and I asked her to ask it again. In theory, yes. If somebody is posing as somebody else that might be in your contacts, and they're trying to get financial information from you, they already know what you're worth. There are sites on the dark web that they can buy. They can buy batches of phone numbers, serial numbers, social security numbers, all that information. So, I mean, if they're posing as that, they already know what you're worth. But it is few and far between that somebody is going to do that. I can't think of anything that we've come in contact with where somebody has posed as somebody that's already in their contacts and tried to get them to give money or send. I think I got one the other day saying that I paid my charter bill at an address that I've never lived at. So, I'd love to have the chair that they were offering, but I don't have anything like that. But I mean, it kind of falls in line with emails. If you get a text from somebody you don't know, just delete it. If you're that important to that person that texts you and they, get mad that you didn't send a reply back, they'll probably call you, or you'll run into them eventually. You do not give your full number over the phone, no. Now, when you're in person, there are some places, any place that I've ever been to, and I took my girlfriend to the doctor the other day, she only had to give the last 4. Now, if it's one of those things where you're opening up a new account or a new credit account, those are items that they do have to have, unfortunately. For them to actually be accredited, a bank or financial institution, that is a way that they attach that information to you personally. It's the same thing with your phone in your doctor's office. I think any doctor's office I've ever dealt with, if you call them on the phone, they do not ask for your full social, ever. They only ask for your last 4. So she was asking for those that didn't hear, if it's safe to still use checks or using the account information in your routing number. So your bank's routing number, it's not hidden. I don't know what bank you're with. I've got an SE Telco account. SE Telco has their routing number on their website. The only information that you would need to pertain to or to make sure that you get rid of is your your checking account or savings account number that might be on those. So even if you pulled up your online, if you were looking at your online banking, if you pulled up a check that you wrote, let's just say you were looking at January statement online. Even when you pull up your check on your account, it should not have your checking number down at the bottom of the check. It should not have that on there. I've got an SE Telco account using my mobile banking. If I pull up a check, it doesn't have that information on the bottom of the check copy. Now, it's one of those things, I still use checks. Still use them all the time. It's one of those things that it happens. We get cases with those all the time. I've got a case right now with a business in Greenville that had, I don't know if you just wanted to put a round ballpark number, about $600,000 hit their account within the last 2 months. There's crews that go around that all they do is, I go to work every day. Their work every day is going around stealing mail. So you've got some crews that they'll take the actual check, just the check out of the mail. They'll put the mail back. You got some that'll actually open up the mail if they see that it's a check. They'll take a picture of the check, put your mail right back in. So it's kind of hit and miss, whether or not somebody's going to use your check information or not. But it's one of those things that, I guess the easy way to explain it is, it's a pain in the butt to do or to deal with when it happens. But your bank, as long as they can show that it's not you, your bank is insured. So they'll put that money back into your account. You might have to do a few extra steps, but it's not the end of the world. Even if you had somebody write a check against your account for $1 million, I know if it happened in my account, the bank would probably just laugh their heads off. But your bank, they still dot their I's and cross their T's to make sure that was not you. And you will get that money back. Yeah, there's, in today's technology, I know a lot of people use Zelle. Zelle actually has partnered with banks. That's kind of how they got their start, which is kind of different than Cash App. Zelle is actually insured, whereas Cash App is not. But you also have companies like Venmo. I know a bunch of guys I play softball with on the side. They use Venmo all the time, and I usually put smart aleck messages because apparently cash is not good anymore. But, if you are sending money, there's still nothing wrong with sending checks. It's just one of those things that, it's about like driving every day. At some point in time, you're going to get in a wreck. Now, whether or not it's a bad wreck or a good wreck, nobody knows. It's the same thing with your check. It might get taken, it might not get taken. What is Bitcoin? So Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency. It is. Some people say it isn't. But that would be, I don't know if we got enough time for that discussion. Bitcoin was kind of started as another form of payment, as a way to sort of not be able to track where or how a payment got started. But Bitcoin has come a long way from what it used to be. There's actually ways to track Bitcoin and all, but when it comes to Bitcoin and scams, there's no agency in the United States. Only in a few states will they take Bitcoin. I think Florida is in the process of taking Bitcoin to pay taxes. But the United States as a whole, there's no agency that takes Bitcoin at all. If that answers. I know we don't have enough time to do all of Bitcoin questions, but it is a cryptocurrency and it is used as a form of currency. So getting the title to your home, how do you prevent that? Making sure that everything is documented and done through an attorney, and there should not be any quitclaim deeds. It's probably the fastest way for somebody to lose a home. Doesn't happen very often with actual homes that people are residing in. Most of that happens on homes that are vacant, nobody's living in, and then just vacant property where there's no house on. But your best way to prevent any of that stuff is kind of just to keep looking online. If you go to the Greenville County Tax website, check your property. Anytime you get to notice that your property taxes are due, just make sure that your stuff is online. Excuse me, make sure it's all up to date online when you're looking. If there's anything that shows that there's, excuse me, if there's any kind of changes, you can always go up to the county tax office or Spartanburg or, whichever county you live in. But make sure that everything's done through an attorney when it comes to stuff like that. So the question was scammers using your information to your voice signaling, because there's some institutions that use that. To answer your question, yes, that has happened. But I mean, if it's like I told some folks during the break, if there's a number coming up and you don't know who it is, just don't answer. If they get mad about it, who cares? You don't know who it was. Or if it's that important, they'll call you back. If there's a lot of those end up coming from folks that are using other areas of the country. I think yesterday I got one from like Cape Cod. I don't know anybody that lives in Cape Cod, so there's no reason I should be expecting a call from Cape Cod. So just don't answer. If it is important, they'll leave you a voicemail. And if it's important for you to call them back after you listen to it, then you can talk to them. But most of your banks that use voice recognition, there's more than just the voice that they actually tie stuff into. Yeah, any of that information, as far as your title or property, it should go through an attorney that's licensed to do that stuff. So the question was, is it safe to run Google or Lexus? I think like an Amazon Echo? Yes. It is safe. Just make sure that it's set up just for your home. Whenever you're setting up something, even with your modem, just make sure you put a password on it. I know with Charter, depending on what your internet service provider is, they'll put a sticker on the back that has your password. My suggestion to that is, if you end up having a password book or something to keep your passwords in, tear that sticker off and keep your password somewhere else. But just don't make your Wi-Fi so it's open. Make sure that it's only secured to your network. That way nobody can park in your driveway, using your internet. Because we have done search warrants where somebody's information was used to open up a bank account. So we went to do a search warrant at, we'll just use a random address, 123 Maple Drive is where we got information that an IP address was being used. So when we did that search warrant, we checked the router. All the information was correct to where that IP address was coming from. But we ended up finding out we actually had to get it from the router where somebody was tied in using their Wi-Fi because it was not secure. So just make sure that your devices are secured to your network. You can do that. I don't know why, but I guess it'd be a blessing or a curse depending on which way you look at it. I could tell you my last 5 debit card numbers, the full numbers, expiration dates, all that right offhand, 2 of my credit cards. So, I don't necessarily have to do that. I wouldn't suggest keeping that information out. Now, if you have a safe, you can make copies of it, keep it in your safe. But don't just make copies to keep copies. And then if you do end up having to use that information, you've got it on hand. But if you contact your credit card company or your bank or your financial institution, they'll provide you that information. Yep. So some places, she was asking about the CV code on the back of your credit card or debit card. If you have an American Express card, it's actually on the front. It's 4 digits, not 3. But all that is, that's just another form of security. If I was to see you standing in line at a checkout counter, let's just say you're getting ready to use your debit card or your credit card, and I'm standing behind you. I take a screenshot or I take a picture of your card. So if I go and try and use your card, I'm still missing those 3 digits. So I can't use your card, right? Because I don't have the other side unless I said, hey, can I look at the back of your card and take a picture of that? I already got the front, you know? So I mean, that's all that is. That's just another security feature. That's pretty much what it's there for.
Thank you.